For the longest time, I feel like people never really gave villains in a story much respect, especially in the mainstream film industry. Villains often are a great addition to a story as a whole, however, as individual characters may lack in a lot of ways. Villains are considered the bad guys, but are they always that bad? Villains usually have a moral compass to follow, even though the things they do may be outrageous. A good villain should always have reasons to do things, and not just be one-dimensional. One-dimensional villains could have their place in a story, however, as individual characters they may be lacking because their whole reasoning behind even existing is just to provide an opposition to the good guys, or the people with good intentions. I feel like superhero movies are a great example of showing some one-dimensional villains. Examples of two villains from superhero movies, the first being the Dark Knight's Joker. He's a good example of a one-dimensional villain. Even though he is a loved character of the series, before the release of his own film, the outlook of him to the wider media is simply a madman who wants to do evil things just cause he can, and provide an opposition to the character, in this case being Batman. This type of character is not that interesting in my opinion. Let's compare this to another villain. Wenwu from Shang-Chi. This is a character that you can't just say is an evil mastermind just because. Rather, he has a reason for it. We see his development through different stages in his life. When we see him wanting to do bad things, we can also sympathize with the character, because you can understand the morals. He loves his family, especially his wife. He is blindsided by his power and longing for his wife. However, this creates a more interesting villain that experiences change, and only does these things because he feels he has to. At this point, it does feel like I'm just talking about superhero villains, but my point is that interesting and engaging villains are the ones you're able to relate to. The ones who aren't just stagnant in their lust for power, rather, ones who experience things that may change their outlook on life, and the way they handle things. With the latest release of Arcane, the League of Legends series sweeping the world, I feel like Silco nails this with his character. Personally, I'd think for League of Legends players, it'd probably be harder to relate to this character, because he is completely new, compared to other characters like Vi and Jinx that we already know of. However, Silco defied that. At the end, I was honestly left so amazed by the way they presented his character. In my opinion, I was left thinking he was one of the most fleshed out and well-developed characters in the series. And in today's video, I'll be explaining why I think this way, and if you agree or not, hopefully reinforce or change your view on the character. Anyway, let's get right into it. First of all, I think the thing Arcane really nails with his characters is the distribution of screen time for the characters. Most of the characters given major screen time seem memorable because each character was given their own time to shine, and to be able to display to the audience the good and bad about them. This made the series not feel specifically like good versus evil. It felt like everyone was a protagonist of their own story, and they each told their story in different ways. I feel like this helps Silco a lot, since the amount of screen time and portrayal of him as a character in his own perspective we were given, the more we were able to sympathize with the character. Based on first glance, I was given the expectation that Silco was gonna be another generic villain, and I didn't expect him to be much at all. Just based off his appearance and in Act 1, it seemed like they were portraying him as another criminal mastermind looking to take over, in this case taking over Zaun and Piltover. We are made clear of Silco's menace in the violent way he takes care of his opposition, and his ways of handing out shimmer to people, pretty much turning them into monsters. However, at the end of Act 1, we can start to see the backstory and reasoning behind Silco's character. We come to learn that Vander is Silco's brother, and he attempted to kill him because ideals didn't match his. This doesn't only showcase Silco's driving force in taking down Vander and his hatred for him, but also his ideals of war that contrasted the ideals of Vander. We see how Vander really prioritizes the safety of children and his family, but when we see Silco with Powder, we can see that Silco starts to understand, maybe just a little. We see Silco hug Powder. We see his mindset change in this moment. Originally wanting to kill her, he feels empathy for the character, having experienced the same thing as her. He as well was left for dead by their own sibling, and that being avowed for vengeance. This event really strengthened the character and added structure to build upon. It gave the character a new motive by giving him a relationship on a personal level, which is raising Jinx, but also getting revenge for her. This is an example of depth in a character and experiencing development. Silco was a broken man who didn't understand the value of family and peace of Vander, and only saw ways of violence and ruthlessness. However, seeing someone as vulnerable as he was makes him seem more human. Seeing someone who could go through the same pain as him made him value family and loved ones more. I feel like the most important part of his character is making him seem human. Villains may have unreal motives, like taking over the world, but introducing Silco's trauma and him seeing it through someone else's perspective makes the character seem more relatable, and makes the relationship between Silco and Jinx seem more genuine. In the second act, we're still reminded of why Silco is the villain, where he still causes catastrophe in Piltover and Zaun, but his growing relationship with Jinx still continues to develop the character. We are given more reasons behind his motives. He reassures Jinx that what he is doing is going to help kids like her and Zaun, and he forgives her for her mistakes. This nature shown by Silco is what shows us behind the bad person is a good father. He understands Jinx has demons that control her into doing outlandish things, and even do things that may not be in his best interests. He understands that she has those demons that controls her and never stops her. We see this later when Vi re-emerges to Jinx, and he doesn't really specifically stop her from meeting her because he knows how much Vi means to Jinx. Throughout this act, we see the balance of the menace of Silco as well as his kindness towards Jinx. We see his lust of power, wanting to cripple the top side to regain control, but also able to have unwavering trust in Jinx in whatever she does. This makes you sympathize for someone who is a good parent, but also be reminded of how menacing he is as a villain. This again brings up the idea of a character with depth. We are seeing these contrasting sides of Silco that not only make him feel more human and relatable, but provides him with development to help us keep invested in the character. Throughout the season of Arcane, we can see how the contrasts between Silco and Vander start to become similarities, as Silco's experiences, slowly but surely, makes him understand the morals of Vander. The final act is where I feel this all culminates in a sad but very well thought out ending of the character. Again, we are still given a balance of good and evil to remind us he's not just an innocent character. He threatens and kills his opposition during this act. However, this is where he really is given a presence of menace throughout Piltover and Zaun. But beside that, the relationship with Jinx elevates the character so much more. I like the sort of foreshadowing in episode 7 given by Silco as well, where he tells Marcus, "Everyone makes mistakes, but what's important is that we don't repeat them." I don't know if this was intentional, but this quote really references the downfall of him, which is Jinx, who makes continuous mistakes. After Jinx's fight with Echo, I think this is where Silco and Jinx's relationship really shows. We can see the result of the fight being Jinx being injured to the point of near death. However, Silco was willing to put her under procedures that could likely kill her. Before this, you could argue that Silco was simply using Jinx in the means to strengthen his stronghold across Piltover. However, this moment is when you can clearly feel the love for her, believing that she will survive. The last episode is the culmination of all these things. The relationships and past experiences all come back to Silco in this episode. Put into a situation where the independence of Zaun was only achievable by giving up Jinx. This is the moment where Silco finally understands Vander, that the cost of war and freedom is losing the ones closest to us, and starts to understand the wrongfulness in his morals. The final scene of this episode is where this all erupts and really changes your dynamic on not only Silco, but the whole series. We see the tension put towards Jinx, Vi still believing in Powder, and Silco believing in Jinx. This really personalizes the thoughts that go through Jinx's head, where she has to decide if she's still Powder or if she's Jinx now. We see at the end, Jinx mistakenly kills Silco, and exemplifies what she has become, a Jinx, killing people close to her by accident. However, Silco is able to accept her as Jinx, which no one else could. The mental toll on Jinx having to understand her identity was laid to rest by Silco. Only he could understand the trauma and pain that she endured because he had experienced it as well. You really see the change in dynamic where Silco was changed from a power-hungry person to a more personal goal in life that made him seem more human and actually like a good person. People can change. You can't really say Silco turned into a good guy. However, you grow more sympathetic towards him, knowing that he's grown and begins to understand meaning behind the good morals his brother had. This is why I believe Arcane really nailed his character so well. So many layers to him, and I felt like they made it in a way to seem more realistic on how interactions can really change a person's perspective on life. It also got me thinking that the character really changes the dynamic of the whole show. Like, we were given the idea that Vi is the good guy and Silco is bad, but the more you think about it, Vi literally had the same idea as Silco on having war and clashing with the top side for their freedom. And that moral Vi, even if not her fault, ended up getting her adopted father killed, and greatly changing her sister. It's a very trippy thing, but it's so hard to even judge who's good and who's bad. Honestly, I'm just excited for season 2, because how well they delivered characters in this season. Anyway guys, I enjoyed making this video, so if you want to see more Arcane content, or content in general from me, please like, subscribe, and comment anything. Anyway, thanks for watching, and peace.